News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 9 o'clock. I'm Mark Dolan, and this is GB News Tonight. Sir Keir Starmer has delivered his pitch for power as he promises a decade of renewal under Labour.
Turn our backs on never-ending Tory decline with a decade of national renewal.
I think he looks quite dashing without his jacket on. Well, in my big opinion, I explain why the most exciting part of Starmer's speech was when he was covered in glitter. My verdict on a political performance that failed to shine. Then I'll get reaction from my top pundits. This evening, Esther McVeigh, Derek Lord and Rebecca Reid. Plus, can Keir Starmer do a reverse Bojo by smashing the blue wall of Tory voters? I'll be asking a man who's been on both sides of the aisle, Tory Deputy Chairman Lee Anderson. Plus, GB News political correspondent Olivia Utley will join me live from Liverpool to offer her verdict on a critical day for Labour. Also on the way, the Israel-Hamas war continues to rage as the death toll passes 1,700 people. But do the crowds celebrating Hamas terror, which reportedly includes now the murder of babies, prove that Suella Braverman was right to say multiculturalism has failed in this country? Nina Mishkov and Emma Webb debate that in The Clash. Also, as the new Big Brother housemates go woke by announcing their pronouns on the show.
Can we just double-check pronouns so nobody gets offended?
Hallie, what did you say?
She, her.
Fabulous. Yinran, what's your pronouns?
She, her.
Do you want to know my pronouns? Mind your own business. So, is gender madness here to stay? I'll be asking no-nonsense GB News superstar, Nana Akua. As always, you'll get a first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages, and we will discuss Holly Willoughby's bombshell exit from this morning after 14 years. So, a big 2 hours coming up, glitter everywhere, and my verdict on Starmer in just 2 minutes' time. You won't want to miss it. First, here's the news and Polly Middlehurst.
Mark, thank you, and good evening to you. Well, the top story tonight from the GB newsroom is that the US president has condemned the attacks by Hamas on Israel, vowing to have Israel's back. Joe Biden was speaking about an hour ago at the White House. And the Hamas terrorist group has been firing missiles throughout the day at Israel. Earlier, warning residents in the southern Israeli city of Ashkelon to leave their homes. Israel's anti-missile system, the Iron Dome system, used to intercept many of that incoming rocket fire. Joe Biden says Hamas's attack is an act of sheer evil.
This attack has brought to the surface painful memories and the scars left by a millennia of anti-Semitism and genocide of the Jewish people. So in this moment, we must be crystal clear. We stand with Israel. We stand with Israel. And we will make sure Israel has what it needs to take care of its citizens, defend itself, and respond to this attack.
Meanwhile, Israeli soldiers have been clearing the Kfar Aza kibbutz. That's in one of the hardest hit areas of the Hamas attack today. As IDF soldiers went through that camp, they discovered men, women and children believed to have been killed at the kibbutz. Israeli soldiers given the task of retrieving those bodies after Hamas had breached the border from Gaza into the kibbutz. Well, GB News reporter Charlie Peters is based in Tel Aviv at the moment. He spoke to one survivor who'd been hiding at a kibbutz in the south, one of the hardest hit areas of the Hamas attacks.
Did you see anything in the street when you drove through? Did you see
bodies? And yeah, mostly bodies. Some of them were burned, so we didn't recognize people. Some of them were terrorist bodies. Later on, I found out that I have a few of my friends in the party, in the rave that was raging at that morning. Some of them were kidnapped, some of them were raped and taken under hostage to the Gaza Strip. It was really horrible.
Daniel Byton, a kibbutz survivor, speaking there. Now, in other news today, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has promised a decade of national renewal if his party's elected at the next general election. Addressing the Labour Party conference today in Liverpool, he pledged to build a better Britain and announced plans to create new towns and build more homes. He also focused on the UK's economic growth as he laid out Labour's plans for Britain's future. And just lastly, the news from the entertainment world that TV presenter Holly Willoughby has announced she's quitting ITV's This Morning show after 14 years on the programme. In an Instagram post today, she said it had been an honour just to be part of its story and she had made the decision for herself and her family. Just last week, a shopping centre security guard has been charged and remanded in custody over an alleged plot to kidnap and kill her. On TV, online, DAB+ radio and the TuneIn app, this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Sir Keir Starmer addressed Labour Party conference today. That's an hour of my life that I won't get back. I'm just glad I wasn't driving or operating heavy machinery at the time. The only exciting thing that happened was when he was attacked with glitter by a protester campaigning for electoral reform.
Thank you, Conference.
True democracy is citizen-led. Politics needs an update. We demand a people's house. We demand a people's house. We are in crisis. We are in crisis. Our whole future is in jeopardy.
What a numpty. Well, to be fair, Starmer handled the interruption very well. But it was downhill from there. The speech was big on rhetoric, but the content was thinner than an after-eight mint. He took 57 minutes to say nothing. When he did get into detail, it was enough to make you run for the hills. Starmer's bold idea is a 1970s-style state-sponsored business called Great British Energy, a great British waste of time, gambling taxpayer billions on flaky renewables, which, as Germany has demonstrated over the last 10 years, has been a resounding failure. Germany are now reopening coal mines, such is their desperation for energy. For the government to bet the house on green renewables is a move so reckless it would have crooked banker Bernard Madoff blushing. Don't take my word for it, a recent government auction of wind farm licences saw no takers from the private sector. They're not stupid. And just as Rishi Sunak announces a sensible slowdown on net zero, Starmer promises to speed ahead, which is a car crash in slow motion for the country. He spent the whole afternoon banging on about working people. I wonder what working people make of the need to buy an electric car in 2030, not 2035. Having to find God knows how much money for a heat pump boiler and extra bills of up to £15,000 per household to hit this unrealistic goal. There was no mention of stifling political correctness and the rise of woke. Last week, Rishi Sunak said on stage, a man is a man and a woman is a woman. That's just common sense. Well, Sir Keir Starmer didn't have the balls to say the same today. And there was no mention of how they will tackle the eye-watering debt and the ongoing pandemic levels of public spending. It's obvious the moment they get into power, the trade unions who bankroll the party will expect pay rises for everyone, pushing up prices. There were some good bits in there. The NHS focusing on prevention of illness rather than treatment of it, technical colleges to skill up the next generation, and the construction of 1.5 million homes, building on brown and greenfield sites. The problem is, there was no timeline for those 1.5 million homes. Pop star heartthrob Harry Styles will probably be drawing his state pension before it happens. And his bold plan for housing ignores the elephant in the room: current levels of both illegal and legal net migration. Whether right or wrong, with 600,000 people entering the country legally last year, and of course that will continue, then these 1.5 million houses won't even touch the sides. Meanwhile, stopping the boats doesn't even make it onto his top 5 list of missions or get a mention in the speech. But we know what he thinks on this issue because he said it on Sunday morning. He said he will axe the Rwanda plan, even if it's working. At the end of an overlong speech in which my arse hurt for all the wrong reasons, he said he wanted to be in power for 10 years. Well, on the strength of this, 10 minutes would be too much. Sir Keir has today once again shown us that all that glitters is not gold. Well done to Chris in our props department for the glitter. OK, let's head straight over to Liverpool now and get reaction to what's happening up at Labour Party conference and Olivia Utley. Olivia, what is the mood at Labour Party conference and the feedback in regards to Keir Starmer's speech?
Hello, Mark. Well, I have to say there was a lot of energy in that room today. It was a far cry from Rishi Sunak's speech last week. The room was absolutely packed to the rafters. Keir Starmer received 17 standing ovations over the course of his hour-long speech. It very much seems as though he has won over the Labour faithful. The question, though, is has he won over the wider British public? A Savanta poll of 2,000 people, which was published shortly after the end of Keir Starmer's speech, revealed that the word that most people used to describe the Labour leader was dull or boring. So it could be that Keir Starmer has the faithful, which is one step along the way, but doesn't yet have the wider public. As for the substance of the speech, there wasn't much new in it. Well, we weren't really expecting anything new. And he really doubled down on a message that he's been giving out a lot over the past few weeks and months, which is essentially that Labour is here to fix the messes that the Conservatives have made over the last 13 years. Well, to many, that might seem like quite a compelling proposition. Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, said in her speech yesterday, what's better for your family than it was 13 years ago when the Tories took office? And I think for a lot of people that message will really resonate. What has improved in the 13 years of Tory rule? But if Keir Starmer is trying to base his entire election pitch on essentially not being the Conservatives, on being a sort of more competent version of the Tories, of doing everything that the Tories would like to do, i.e. lower taxes, reform the NHS, build more houses, etc., all of these Tory messages, but just try and achieve them in a more competent fashion than the Tories have done before, then it could be that Labour's appeal is very broad, but not very deep. And if the Tories do manage to get their act together in the next 12 months or so, it could be that Keir Starmer's popularity, which I have to say did seem pretty impressive today, turns out to run dry very quickly indeed. It'll be really, really interesting to see what the next few months have to offer.
Olivia Utley, will catch up again soon. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's get reaction now from former Cabinet Minister and GB News star Esther McVey, MP, banker and visiting professor, no less, Derek Lord, and author and journalist Rebecca Reid. Derek, did that speech move the dial for Labour today?
It probably did, and it's probably not what viewers and listeners want to hear. But I think the thing that's really significant about it is probably threefold. First is that he has definitely moved the Labour Party to the right. The second is that he's adopting Tory language, talking about aspiration, talking about home ownership, and so on, traditional Tory grounds. And the third is that he's actually got discipline in his own party, something that's strikingly, obviously not happening within the Conservative Party.
What do you think, Rebecca? Were you impressed by that speech? Was it a game changer? Because it needed to be.
I mean, it was comforting. I'm an easy audience because I just want him to not screw it up. But I think
was it a cup of Horlicks today?
It was just, yeah, it was like a big glass.
Not a pint of Stella.
No, like a big glass of wine because, you know, who needs Horlicks in their life? But what I was comforted most by was that if I think about members of my family who've always voted Tory but who are really fed up, I could see them perhaps being swayed by this because, as Derek says, it feels safe. It's not saying we're going to abolish gender and all children will be raised non-binary and, you know, we're going to make everyone go vegan tomorrow. It was a very conservative Labour speech, and I think that's sensible. And I think Olivia makes a really good point that his pitch is we're not the Tories, but at the moment people are fed up enough that we're not the Tories might win the election. And I trust that if he gets it, he might do a good enough job. I kind of almost don't need to know what he's going to do.
Indeed. Esther, what's your appraisal of what you heard today?
Well, I thought there was no vision. I thought there was a dull void where there should have been a vision. I thought there was no guiding principles. I thought there was lots of platitudes, no policy. And then I thought, well, for a man who's moved from Corbyn to Blair in a blink of an eye, it shows he's got no guiding policies. He is a lawyer, isn't he? Give him a brief and he'll argue it, give him a speech and he'll say it, and this one to me felt very Mandelson-esque kind of speech. He is the British equivalent of Joe Biden. He just reads the autocue better. So there was no principles, and he's got no instinct for politics, and this is why you see that oscillation. One moment he's renationalising, the next he isn't. One moment he's student fees, the next he isn't going to get rid of them. I think it's whoever speaks to him last. So he's all ears, but no ideas.
Go on, Rebecca.
Oscillating is surely better than coming up with an idea and saying, well, we've put it on the leaflet now, so we're going to have to do it. I think he's listening, and I think he's changing to what he thinks will win him the election, but also what people want. And he's probably seen that Rishi is being pounded by those 5 things he said he was going to do. If you stand up and you say 5 things and you don't do them, you have dug your own grave. It must be horrible for Rishi. I really feel
All
for him.
he
It's
kept
better
saying
politics not
was,
to.
which I thought was very telling, because obviously the Labour Party, who've been sort of taken over by the sort of metropolitan elite, they wouldn't know a working class person if they fell over it. That's why they lost the Red
The Tories
Ball.
are pretty elite,
And,
aren't they? Rishi Sunak's pretty elite.
So he kept saying working class because he had to try and dupe them. They've brought in ULEZ, which will affect the working class. They are now reversing the net zero, which will impact the working class. This isn't going to help the working class. The working class are going to pay for all his mistakes.
He talked more about working people than he did working class people. That's speaking to the Labour Party and talking directly
the
to
working people have always been the Tories who are paying the taxes.
You think people who vote for Labour don't work?
You don't understand my point. He was speaking internally to his audience. I don't like the language. I think it's repulsive. But nonetheless, I mean, he does have an internal audience that he has to address. And if I may say so, if Rishi Sunak thinks that tinkering around with A-levels and actually sort of doing something about teenagers and cigarettes is going to win the Tories the next election...
The big issue he never raised was immigration as well.
And
he didn't.
Inflation wasn't particularly touched upon as it wasn't yesterday.
I just want to know when the meeting was that was decided in the Tory party, when everybody got together and went, we're going to start a thing that Tories are poor and Labour people are rich metropolitan elites. They're not. Labour is traditionally the party of people with less money,
And
not more money. Where is this
Well, net zero,
They're all sitting there eating quinoa and trying to ruin the world.
Let me tell you, net zero is a policy for the elite and can only be afforded by the laptop
climate
classes.
change destabilises the political system. Climate change will affect everyone.
Where are poor families going to find £15,000 between now and 2050?
That is not a number that is widely credited, and it's also not a number that's going to apply to people with smaller houses.
Rebecca, if you look at the polling over the last 20 years, that working class people left the Labour Party because they could see that they weren't for them at all.
That's not
they
the
had
current
been
polling.
hijacked
The current
by,
polling
as I
doesn't
said,
show that at all.
It totally does. That's why
Actually, forget the working class people for the...
Please don't.
The Tories do love to do that.
Please don't.
For a moment, because actually the truth is that Keir Starmer has made his appeal to the soft Tory voter, and they may not be working class. So I don't think that we need frame this in a narrative about class. I think it's a narrative about tactics, and I think his tactics are right.
No, he'll be going woke, as we know. We'll be going broke, as they say. He'll also be increasing taxing, increasing spending.
Net zero is going to cost...
It's such a silly phrase.
Net zero is going to cost my viewers and listeners money. They're going to have to buy an electric car in 2030,
As will climate change,
not in
when
2035.
everyone's flooded.
They can't afford it. It can't be afforded. Meanwhile, China are building coal-fired power stations every month.
Yeah, and we should be trying to stop that. Don't get me wrong. We shouldn't be bearing the brunt of it.
Listen, more from my brilliant pundits very shortly. As you know, this home is very much about free speech here at GB News, so keep yours coming. mark@gbnews.com is the email. Listen, lots more to get through. Can Keir Starmer do a reverse Bojo by smashing the blue wall of Tory voters? I'll be asking a man who's been on both sides of the political aisle, Tory Deputy Chairman Lee Anderson. But up next in the clash, after London descended into chaos last night with Palestinian and Israeli protesters being pulled apart by police, does it prove that Suella Braverman was right to say multiculturalism has failed? Nina Mishkov and Emma Webb will debate that in the clash. Sparks will fly. See you in 2.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Well, Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6 is Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, a big reaction on email to my big opinion. Net Zero Nutters is the headline of this particular email from Paul. £15,000 for a heat pump, 35 grand for a new electric car. Tell me if anyone who is working class can pay 50 grand for net zero. Alan says 1.5 million new homes, referring to post-World War II. Many of these were prefabs. If he's referring to energy-efficient new builds, how will he refurbish the 19 million current poor housing that we have? He's living in cloud cuckoo land. There you go. A working-class red wall voter is how Alan describes himself. And Martin, as a natural Conservative, I'm totally turned off by the current government. Cigarettes and A-levels are nonsense, as is the infrastructure con. Labour has at least got a vision for attractive housing. Keep those emails coming. Mark at gbnews.com. Tory Deputy Chairman Lee Anderson is standing by. Can Labour steal Tory votes in a year's time? But first, the clash. And Suella Braverman has written to police chiefs to demand that anyone showing support for the Hamas terror group will be treated with the full force of the law. Hamas attacks have claimed the lives of more than 1,000 Israelis since Saturday, a death toll that reportedly includes babies. But hundreds of pro-Palestine protesters descended on the Israeli embassy in London last night, chanting "Free Palestine." Israel and Palestine protesters then had to be separated by police as tensions threatened to boil over. The Home Secretary today said there can be no place for anti-Semitism or glorification of terrorism on the streets of Britain. I therefore expect the police to use the full force of the law against displays of support for Hamas. The Daily Telegraph columnist and assistant editor Michael Deacon believes that the mobs cheering Hamas on the streets of Britain have proved Braverman right. He said when the Home Secretary said multiculturalism had failed, this is exactly what she was getting at. But what do you think? Do the crowds celebrating Hamas's acts of terror prove that Braverman was right? Let me know your thoughts. Mark at gbnews.com or at gbnews on Twitter. Do vote in the poll. I'll bring you the results shortly. But to debate this now, I'm delighted to welcome broadcaster Nina Mishkov and the UK director of the Common Sense Society, Emma Webb. Emma, has Braverman been proved right in less than a week?
Well, I think that, the argument that Suella Braverman made was made by David Cameron and actually by the hero of the left, Angela Merkel, back in 2015. And the truth is that nothing and not a damn thing has been done about it since they admitted that multiculturalism had failed. Nothing has come of that reflection. And absolutely, she's completely right. Expressing support for a prescribed terrorist organization, which Hamas is illegal in this country. So she's absolutely right. It's bizarre that in this country we see people being arrested for tweets that they put online, for retweeting limericks. People are getting in trouble for all sorts of things that the police shouldn't be spending their time on. And instead, we're seeing people in the streets expressing support and frankly being jubilant and celebrating the murder of Jewish people, innocent civilians, as you mentioned, the kidnap of elderly ladies from their homes, the murder of children, the rape of women. This is being celebrated by people who believe that the freedom of Palestine should come by any means necessary. They think the ends justify the means. It's absolutely abhorrent. And of course, people have the right to protest. People have the right to express their opinions on any matter at all. But the reality is that expressing your support for a prescribed terror organization or inciting hatred, inciting violence, to be clear, not inciting hatred, that is something that is prescribed. So supporting Hamas, a terrorist organization, is prescribed under British law.
Yes, Nina, celebrating acts of terror, that is against British values, but it's happening in our cities. Does this tell us that multiculturalism is failing?
No, it doesn't. I mean, we're all absolutely in despair about what's happening in Gaza and in Israel.
Well, the people cheering on the streets are not.
I agree. But they are. I'm not supporting Hamas by any means, and I'm quite the reverse. And what Emma said was absolutely right. But that does not. These are people who are supporting the unsupportable. But that doesn't mean that multiculturalism has failed. They are not. Protesting against the British way of life, about our country. Presumably they have neighbours that maybe as normal Palestinians they are living amongst British people, amongst Polish people, amongst Italian people, amongst Greeks, amongst Irish. That is multiculturalism. Any civilised city, capital city in the world, you will see this, that people live quietly amongst each other. This is an extreme situation and an extreme version.
It's not very extreme because it's thousands of people in our cities and it's happening across the Western world.
It's not thousands. It's perhaps hundreds, I would say. It's not thousands and thousands. It's a small group of extremists, and that does not mean that we do not live happily alongside each other. Suella Braverman is a prime example of someone for whom multiculturalism has worked. So is Rishi Sunak. So, to be fair, are you, Mark? I assume from your surname that you're of Irish heritage.
Yeah.
That's multicultural. My father was Polish. That's multicultural. What is not multicultural, but is pure terrorism, is Hamas and the people who support Hamas.
Briefly, Nina, though, can you imagine after 9/11 if people had been on the streets of London and Manchester and Glasgow and Belfast cheering that atrocity. What's the difference?
No, it's...
Or cheering the Second World War and the treatment of Jewish people in Germany.
I'm not supporting anybody who supports Hamas and cheering for Hamas and cheering for the horrendous, revolting, inhumane things that are going on.
We have communities in our country who are celebrating what happened this weekend, and that's Suella Braverman's point.
But they're saying, but they're saying also, like people would, people saying that if you're Irish, you would support the IRA, which is patently nonsense.
Okay.
You cannot extrapolate from that. This is an extreme situation and extreme people.
Nina raises a brilliant point, which is the evil acts of Hamas, who are a terror group, do not represent all Palestinians. There are some in Palestine who support what Hamas do, but many who don't. So do you acknowledge Nina's point there?
There are civilians who are caught up in this on both sides. But I think what Nina was describing there is a multi-ethnic society, which I'm sure that nobody has any arguments with. What we're talking about with multiculturalism is what has been described by some as plural monoculturalism. You end up with a kind of mosaic of tyrannies with closed communities that are not integrating. I actually don't think that what we're seeing at the moment in our streets, particularly the support for Hamas, is exclusively some issue to do with multiculturalism, because we've seen people from all sorts of communities, and Jeremy Corbyn himself is somebody who described Hamas as his friends in the past. There are all sorts of people who have expressed support for Hamas, people who are frankly despicably celebrating this online. This is a problem to do with the values that we hold as a society. And, yes, multiculturalism has failed. As I said, we acknowledged that back in 2015. It doesn't work to have all of these close communities not integrating. But what we're seeing at the moment with this celebration of Hamas's atrocities in our street is a much, much bigger problem that we need to have a proper conversation about. It's not just limited to any issues relating to multiculturalism that have been talked about to death already.
Emma, would you say that those celebrating the atrocities of Hamas this weekend in this country amount to hundreds or thousands?
I have absolutely no idea, but one is too many.
OK, brilliant stuff. Look, my thanks to Nina Mishkov and Emma Webb for a fascinating debate. What's your view? Do crowds cheering Hamas prove Suella Braverman right about multiculturalism? Well, Laura says those protests were not multiculturalism. They were supporting Hamas, a terror organisation. They should all have been arrested. David says, in this context, yes, it has failed, but many parts of the UK have benefited from multiculturalism and many public services are much better because of it. Sasha says, of course, multiculturalism doesn't and never will work because it has been forced on us by politicians. The protests in London last night proved that. Well, your verdict is in. And let me tell you that 91% of you agree that crowds cheering Hamas prove Braverman right. 9% say they do not. Coming up, as the new Big Brother housemates go woke by announcing their pronouns on the show, is gender madness here to stay? I'll be asking no-nonsense GB News superstar Nana Acquia. Plus, I'll be asking Nana, was the presenter of Question Time, Fiona Bruce, right to apologise after a race row? More on that shortly. But first, can Keir Starmer do a reverse Bojo by smashing the blue wall of Tory voters? I'll be asking a man who's been on both sides of the political aisle, Tory Deputy Chairman Lee Anderson. He's next.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
Affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
GB News superstar Nana Akua coming up to discuss Big Brother stars being forced to declare their pronouns on TV and why the BBC's Fiona Bruce shouldn't be apologising after a race row on Question Time. But first, the real world with Lee Anderson. And as we've discussed earlier tonight, Keir Starmer has set out his plans for government today at the Labour Party conference, concluding his speech with a special appeal to Tory voters.
So if you are a Conservative voter who despairs of this, if you look in horror at the descent of your party into the murky waters of populism and conspiracy, with no argument for economic change, if you feel our country needs a party that can serve, that fights for our union, our environment, the rule of law, family life, the careful bond between this generation and the next, then let me tell you, Britain already has one, and you can join it. It's this Labour Party.
Now, Lee, Rachel Reeves's spending plans are modest at best. Clearly, Tony Blair is starting to, have some influence on the leadership of the Labour Party. They've shifted to the right. Are they a threat to the Tories?
They're always a threat, the Labour Party are. They're a threat to this country, Mark. Look, I listened to Rachel early on. Unfortunately, I didn't listen to Keir's speech earlier on. But he thinks it's in the bag. He's getting a little bit cocky. He's a little bit smug, and he's taking the British public for granted at the moment. There was no substance in there. My colleagues have told me today. I was looking at the press snippets after his speech. Nothing in there of any substance at all.
1.5 million homes, tech colleges for young people to get skills.
Well, look, I mean, this is a cut and paste of what Michael Gove was saying back in July, on July the 24th.
Green Revolution?
Yeah, I mean, Gove and our government was saying this back in July. It's a cut and paste. He's got no new ideas. The British public, I knock doors every week, Mark, in Ashfield, and they say they are grumpy with the Conservative Party, obviously, after 13 years. But there's no love for Starmer at all. They're not rushing back to vote for Labour. The first-time Tory voters are not going back to Labour at all. They're grumpy with us, as I keep saying. But like I say, no love for Starmer.
But
They don't trust him.
What you heard from Starmer today, there was nothing in there that would frighten the horses. And that is surely, therefore, demonstrates he could do a Tony Blair, because it was Tony Blair who got Tory voters to support him in 1997.
Yeah, but listen,
why can't Starmer do it second time around?
But listen, I mean, back in 97, Blair had some good policies. The minimum wage was a killer. It was a killer. He was doubling people's wages overnight. He had giants in his shadow cabinet. He had Alistair Darling. He had Gordon Brown. He had some Robin Cook. He had Jack Straw. He had these real big heavyweight politicians.
Big players, yeah.
Big players who you could see automatically they could slot into being a cabinet straight away. Who's he got now? He's got Angela Rayner. He's got Anna Eagle. He's got John Ashworth. These are jokes.
Well, Rachel Reeves with a background in the Bank of England, an economist.
Well, she has
good credentials.
Well, you knock on any door in Ashfield and ask people who Rachel Reeves is. They've not a clue who Rachel Reeves is. But, I mean, like I say before, Blair had good policies. He had great politicians behind him who could just drop into that slot. I mean, Starmer's got nothing. All he's got is himself. I mean, look at Lammy. I mean, he's a laughing stock. You knock on doors in Ashfield, David Lammy is an absolute laughing stock.
Why?
Well, he is. I mean... He comes across as anti-British. He won't let the Brexit argument finish. He wants to rejoin the EU. Every single word he mutters lately is about rejoining the EU. I mean, people in Ashfield and the Red Wall are furious about that.
Can you call him anti-British? I mean, he's a proud Londoner. I think he's a Spurs fan. You know what I mean? He's hardly anti-British.
Well, I say he's anti-Brexit. I mean, probably a poor choice of words there. But, every time he chimes up on... whether it's on GBNews or LBC or wherever he is, it's anti-Brexit. He refuses to accept the democratic will of the British people.
Well, of course, he did say he wants to date the EU again, and I know that you'd be swiping left, not right.
Listen, date, what does that mean? Is he on Tinder? Is he on some sort of dating app? Look, he needs to get a grip. I mean, look, I wish he'd come and stand against me in Ashfield. This David Lammy character. He's all right in London and the places like this, but come to the real world, which is the North, which is the Red Wall seats, stand against people like me, he wouldn't have a prayer. Absolutely.
Well, I guess he represents quite a challenged part of London. It's not exactly.
Look, I learned very early on when I got to Parliament. People used to say to me, "How do you know which way to vote?" And I used to say to them, "Look which voting lobby David Lammy's going in, and go in the other one." And then if you do that, you've got it right.
Listen, we must get David Lammy on, and maybe a ding-dong between the two of you would be a great thing, great telly. Back to Blair. Is a vote for Starmer a vote for Blair? Will Blair be the backseat driver?
Well, I think he will, because, Blair's been sniffing about now for the past few months, past few years. He seems to be the driving force behind the Labour Party at the moment. He will not go away. He's like a bad political smell. I think Starmer is weak. He's very weak indeed. I think his shadow cabinet is weak. And they're looking for guidance, they're looking for some sort of leadership from Blair. Blair needs to go away. He's caused enough problems in this world as it is. Look at the Iraq War. I can never forgive him for that. And I think, Sir Keir Starmer, he needs to be his own man. And I think the British public are looking at him now and seeing Blair in the background and thinking, you know what, he's not his own man. He's being led by Blair.
You were, of course, a Labour man yourself. Yeah. Why did you leave?
Well, there was a couple of things, really. There was Corbyn, there was Brexit, and there was Boris. But Boris was a big draw for me. But it was that... the Labour Party is supposed to represent the working class, but we were knocking on doors in 2017 during the general election. We were getting chased off the street by people who were very, very angry with us. These were health workers, these were veterans who could not stand Jeremy Corbyn. They were literally chasing us off the street, calling us traitors. And you know what? I thought to myself, this Labour Party is not the party for me. Joined the Tory Party, could not have been happier, and now I'm doing this job.
But what about last week? Was it a wake compared to the Labour Party conference? I'm told that the atmosphere is buzzing in Liverpool this week, whereas it was like a morgue, wasn't it, last week in Manchester?
What a load of rubbish that is. I mean, I was at the Tory conference last week. It was a lot better than last year. Very positive. Lots of young people there. Listen, if you think it's buzzing at a Labour conference, really, you need to get out more, Mark. You really do. I mean, I've seen it today. The Tory conference was pretty good. We had a tough time last year. We've had a tough 12 months. But last Sunday, lots of young people there, enthusiastic. It's not over. It's all to play for.
All right, so you think that Rishi Sunak can win the next election?
Definitely.
And you've not had a drink tonight?
I've had a few.
OK. I rest my case. Listen, let me tell you that our coverage, of course, of both conferences has been fantastic. Well done to all my colleagues. And let me tell you that we were surprised by a fleeting cameo appearance from Peter Mandelson, New Labour guru, of course. Take a watch of this.
I want GBNews to keep going. They're stirring the pot. They're creating divisions in the Conservative Party.
We're doing a much better job than that.
They're undoing the Conservative Party, and very, very timely it is too.
Well, good on you, Peter Mandelson, and well done to Andrew Pearce for that exclusive. So, Peter Mandelson, the architect of New Labour, wants GB News to keep on going.
Well, he's a wise man. Isn't he, Mark? Look,
although he says it's because this channel is splitting the Tory party, that's what he says.
I don't think it is. Look, I mean, a lot of my friends and family and colleagues watch the GB News. The audience is growing every week, and I go to different associations.
You've given us a bump.
Yes, I go to different associations every Friday and speak to members. I've spoken to about 50 associations over the last year. That's, probably about 20 odd, well, thousands and thousands of people I speak to. They all watch GB News because they're getting their dose of common sense, they're getting politics and a bit of entertainment as well.
Lee, you do need a change of government every so often. So 13 years of Tory rule, time for a change, just for our democracy, surely.
Well, Rishi's badged himself as the Prime Minister of Change over the past few weeks, and I think he is. He's got a plan. He's got his 5-point plan. Look, if Starmer gets in next year...
OK.
Get your passport sorted, Mark, and get out of the country.
That's, listen, can't argue with that. There was a barbed comment from Keir Starmer, which is his job. He's leader of the opposition. He talked about how the Tories had descended into populism and conspiracy. What do you think he meant by that?
Well, I think it's a bit rich coming from Sir Keir Starmer. Every single bandwagon at the moment he seems to be leaping on. He's the populist leader at the moment. He will say anything and do anything to get into number 10. Populism, what does that mean, Mark? It means saying the things that the British public want. There's nothing wrong with that, I don't think.
Can I congratulate you on a very smart haircut, by the way?
Thank you. Short back and sides, £8.
There you go. Worth every penny. As are you. Lee, we'll catch up soon. My thanks to Lee Anderson, the Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party. No, the Chairman. You're Deputy Chairman. Yeah, do you know what? I think it's a matter of time, let's be honest. And also, of course, GB News star. Brilliant stuff. Well, look, lots more to come as Holly Willoughby sensationally quits this morning after 14 years. Can the show survive without its star? We'll debate that shortly. But next, as the new Big Brother housemates go woke by announcing their pronouns on the show, is gender madness here to stay? And why the BBC's Fiona Bruce shouldn't be apologising after a race row on Question Time. No-nonsense GB News superstar Nana Akua is next.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, it's a brilliant question, isn't it? Can Keir Starmer, can he do a Boris Johnson and smash the blue wall of Tory voters? Big response on email. Hi, Mark. I was a Labour supporter, part of the Red Wall, who voted Tory last time due to Brexit, and I will not be voting for this woke, wet, behind-the-ear so-called Labour Party, saying they represent the working class of this country. Neither will I vote for the Tories, who talk the talk and do nothing. I will vote reform. There you go. Fascinating stuff. Keep those emails coming. Folks, let us crack on. Matthew Goodwin and Toby Young coming up, but first it's time for no-nonsense GB News superstar Nana Akua. And ITV's new reboot of the iconic reality show Big Brother has made a splash, with one housemate making broadcasting history by being the first contestant to enter the Big Brother house on a mobility scooter. Brilliant stuff. Congratulations to her. But last night's episode dragged viewers hoping for light entertainment into the gender wars instead. Take a listen.
Can we just double-check pronouns so nobody gets offended?
Hallie, what did you say?
She, her.
Fabulous. Yinran, what's your pronouns?
She, her.
He, him.
He, him.
He, him.
He, him.
She, her. She, her.
He, him. He, him.
He, him.
She, her.
Yeah, she, her.
Oh,
She, her. She, her.
Well, my pronouns are who the hell cares. And Nana, great to have you on the show. Nana, announcing your pronouns is tricky, isn't it? Because it means you're signing up to a mad ideology that you can change your biological sex.
Well, it is nonsense. I would have said my pronouns are HRH, Her Royal Highness, and you can call me that. I mean, honestly, they're going to look at this. I'm hoping that when they look at this, they realise just how ridiculous this is. I mean, as if you need to tell somebody your pronouns. How about just sticking with your name? The whole thing is just awful.
Well, Your Royal Highness, I completely agree with you. And of course, Nana, woe betide anyone that says they won't announce their pronouns. This is compelled speech, isn't it? Imagine being the person at that table that says, no, I don't want to participate in this.
I would be that person. Because you know what? What this is some very nice people thinking that they're going to be all inclusive and make some nice TV and show some niceness. Nobody wants to see that. Nobody's going to watch it. I love it when... Do you remember, what was her name? Was it Makosi? When she had it was supposedly the jacuzzi baby, but obviously she didn't get pregnant, but, you know, that was more like it. Nasty Nick in the Big Brother house, you know.
Yeah.
We want plotting and scheming and interesting stuff, not this patheticness of announcing your pronouns. I would be the person saying, no, I'm not going to do this. It's ridiculous.
Well, indeed, there is pressure. Nana, there is pressure to comply, isn't there? When Halifax had their pronouns on the name badges, they said, look, this is voluntary. But again, you'd have to be pretty brave to not participate. And that's the point. You are pressurised to take part in this.
Well, of course, because if you don't, then you're the odd one out, because everybody else is going along with this narrative of coming out with their pronouns. I just find it absurd. These are perfectly sensible adults who could work out whether someone's a he or a she. And if somebody is a biological man and they look like a man, but they want to be referred to as a she, Well, so if you want to partake in that, you can, but I'm not prepared to lie to my own eyes.
Briefly, though, Nana, I mean, what's the problem with saying that I'm she, her? Because you are a she, her. We know that trans people are subjected to terrible prejudice in our society. Perhaps it's nice that they feel included.
Well, you know, that's fine if they want to say that they're the she, her, but then it's down to the person who is, whether they want to participate in it. Do you know what I mean? But you're never going to refer to someone who you're speaking to as a she or a her anyway, when you're talking to them directly anyway. So it's a bit of a nonsense, and you cannot force someone to tell someone how they should refer to you. If that person sees you as a he and they think you are a he. I mean, it gets really stupid when people start breaking the laws of English language and start calling themselves a they, them, which is absurd.
No,
It's absurd.
listen, absolutely. James, do we have the question time clip? Brilliant stuff. So, Nana, we know that Fiona Bruce has apologised for trying to get the attention of one of her studio audience by saying the black guy in front of me. Take a listen to the offending clip.
The guy there in the middle, the black guy in the middle, yes, you, sir. Yeah.
It's an interesting time for this to be announced. I'm not sure why at the party conference I didn't speak about more funding into schools.
Nana, was an apology necessary?
No, he is black. What's the problem? He's black. I've been called the black girl. I don't have a problem with it. Nobody's insulting or offending. You're looking at a room that's mostly filled with white people, and there's one person who is there between a load of people who are white who is black. You're describing that person just by looking at them, what their descriptive characteristics are. It's absurd. It's happened to me many times. One time I was working at Sky and I was presenting a show, and there was a person in the gallery. It was a black girl. And she was the only black girl in the gallery. And they went ages describing what she was wearing. And then in the end, I went in and I said, what, the black girl? They went, yeah. And I just thought, why didn't you just say that? It's that she's not being offensive. She's simply calling, because she's describing things by colour, because she's picking people out in the audience to speak, he happens to be black. So I don't see the problem. I appreciate that she didn't reference the white people, but that's because the room was mostly full of white people. It would be the same if you were in Ghana and there was a white person in the crowd. You would say the white person, that's not an insult.
Your Royal Highness, a privilege as always. Nana Akua back on GB News on Saturday at 3. Brilliant stuff. So much more to come. Can This Morning survive without Holly Willoughby after she sensationally quits the show today? We'll discuss that in the next hour. But first, as Keir Starmer plans for a decade in power, can the UK survive 10 years of Labour rule? All of that is next.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Rain moving south into northern England, Northern Ireland and Wales overnight. Clearer, but staying blustery for Scotland, whilst it remains warm in the far south. There's a significant temperature contrast across the UK at the moment. Warmth in the southeast, chilly in the north and northwest, and in between a band of rain finally easing across central and western Scotland, pushing into southern Scotland during the evening, Northern Ireland, and then later on across parts of northern England and Wales. The rain pepping up by the end of the night in these areas as well. Now, it stays dry further south, but there'll be a lot of low cloud and mist to begin things on Wednesday. A mild start here, but a chilly start for Scotland, especially central belt northwards, mid-single figures, and a strong wind, in fact gales blowing through exposed northern and northwestern coasts with frequent showers here. So a fairly unpleasant day to come here, even if it has stopped raining. Further south, we've got spells of rain through Wales, the Midlands and East Anglia continuing through the day, staying largely dry after the early mist clears in the far south and southeast. Still warm, but not as warm as it has been. And then it's in the south where the rain comes to a stop on Thursday. The rain does ease, but it stays fairly drizzly along some of these southern counties of England. Brighter skies further north. In fact, a nice sunny day for North Wales, Northern England, much of Scotland and Northern Ireland. And then on Friday, further wet weather in the south before that clears to colder weather at the weekend.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Well, Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Well, it is coming up to 10 o'clock and lots of emails coming in thick and fast across a range of topics. mark@gbnews.com is the email. And as regards the Tories and Labour, can Labour win the next election? Hi, Mark. I've been a Labour supporter, part of the Red Wall, who voted Tory last time due to Brexit. I will not be voting Tory or Labour at the next election. Reform all the way. Colin, hi Mark, I wish I had a stall selling large shoes and flashing red noses at the Labour conference in Liverpool. I'd make a fortune, as it seems to be full of clowns. Well, look, this show is all about opinions. What's yours? mark@gbnews.com. It is 10 o'clock. I am Mark Dolan, and this is GB News Tonight. So Keir Starmer is aiming for a decade in Downing Street as he sets out his ambitious vision for Britain.
We will face down the age of insecurity together. Break the stranglehold of Tory decline. Walk towards a decade of national renewal.
But can Britain really survive 10 years of Labour rule? That's the big debate with my panel of pundits next. Tonight, Esther McVeigh, Derek Lord and Rebecca Reid. As Sir Keir Starmer ignores the nation's frustration at the worsening war on motorists, promising to speed up the march to net zero, does the policy show that Labour is out of touch with ordinary voters? I'll get stuck into that with author and academic Matt Goodwin. Also coming up, with proposals to label processed food as addictive, hot on the heels of Rishi Sunak's plans to phase out smoking, are we, the great British public, now being treated like children? We'll thrash that one out in the media buzz. Also later in the show, what impact would a Labour government have on our rights to free speech? Many are already dreading 5 potential years of woke hell. And the founder of the Free Speech Union, maverick journalist Toby Young, will join me live to look at our freedoms of the future. Also, tomorrow's front pages, and we'll be debating the following. How will Holly Willoughby handle her exit from This Morning? Will the show survive? We'll debate that with my pundits. So much to get through. But first, here's the news and Polly Middlehurst.
Mark, thank you, and good evening to you. Well, the main story from the GB newsroom tonight is that the US president has condemned the attacks by Hamas on Israel, vowing to have Israel's back. Joe Biden was speaking about an hour ago at the White House. Meanwhile, the Hamas terrorist group has been firing missiles throughout the day at Israel, earlier warning residents in the southern city of Ashkelon to leave their homes. Israel's anti-missile system was used to intercept much of the incoming rocket fire. Biden says Hamas's attacks are an act of sheer evil.
This attack has brought to the surface painful memories and the scars left by a millennia of anti-Semitism and genocide of the Jewish people. So in this moment, we must be crystal clear. We stand with Israel. We stand with Israel. And we will make sure Israel has what it needs to take care of its citizens, defend itself, and respond to this attack.
Well, Israeli soldiers have been clearing the Kfar Aza kibbutz. That's in one of the hardest hit areas of Hamas's attacks in the south. Men, women and children are believed to have been killed at the kibbutz, and Israeli troops have had the grim task of retrieving their bodies today after Hamas breached the border from Gaza. The IDF this evening confirming their soldiers have also been responding to fire from Syria with artillery and mortar shelling. That news just coming to us. We'll bring you more on that as we can get it. But in the meantime, GB News reporter Charlie Peters is based for us in Tel Aviv at the moment. He's been speaking to one survivor of the Karmir kibbutz. That's between Ashkelon and Gaza. She told her story.
Did you see anything in the street when you drove through? Did you see
bodies? And yeah, mostly bodies. Some of them were burned, so we didn't recognize people. Some of them were terrorist bodies. Later on, I found out that I have a few of my friends in the party, in the rave that was raging at that morning. Some of them were kidnapped, some of them were raped and taken under hostage to the Gaza Strip. It was really horrible.
Kibbutz attack survivor Daniel Byton speaking there. Now, in other news today, the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has promised a decade of national renewal if his party is elected at the next general election. Addressing the Labour Party conference in Liverpool today, he pledged to build a better Britain and announced plans to create new towns and build more homes. He also focused on the UK's economic growth as he laid out Labour's plans for Britain's future. Now, also tonight, the TV presenter Holly Willoughby has announced she's quitting ITV's This Morning programme after 14 years hosting the show. She said it in an Instagram post today, adding it had been an honour just to be part of the Good Morning story. She's made the decision, she says, for herself and her family. Just last week, a shopping centre security guard was charged and remanded in custody over an alleged plot to kidnap and kill her. You're with GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Thanks, Polly. Tomorrow's news tonight in our Media Buzz. Let's kick off with the very first look at tomorrow's front pages. We start with Metro. 40 babies murdered by Hamas, children beheaded as families slaughtered, say Israel. ISIS-level savagery, says US, as Americans are held hostage. Hamas begins a new blitz after 2 terror chiefs die in raid. Also, as Polly was mentioning in the bulletin, Holly quits. That's right, Holly Willoughby has left this morning after, I believe, 14 years. Will the show survive without her? We'll debate that at 10:30. The Independent. Starmer shrugs off glitter ambush to launch mission to rebuild Britain. And also in a special dispatch in The Independent, horror on the front line. They decapitated women and children. We saw dead babies, an Israeli major claims. The bodies are hidden, so it's impossible to verify, but this village smells of death. The most awful headlines. Well, let's get reaction to the big stories of the day with former Cabinet Minister and GB News presenter Esther McVey, banker and visiting professor Derek Lord, and author and journalist Rebecca Reid. Now, Sir Keir Starmer made a milestone speech at Labour Party conference earlier today, and no amount of glitter was able to stop him from making a bold bid for a decade in Downing Street. Take a listen.
But there's no magic wand here. A decade of national renewal. That's what it will take. We will face down the age of insecurity together. Break the stranglehold of Tory decline. Walk towards a decade of national renewal.
A decade of Labour rule. Do you like the sound of that, Esther?
Oh, no, I certainly don't.
But you've had 13 years of Tory rule. Isn't it their turn to give it a shot? Tories have been in power for 13 years. We've got high inflation, a cost of living crisis. They couldn't do a worse job, could they?
Well, I don't say you go from one and you give somebody else a chance because you think they should. No, no, no.
Do you not sometimes think that there's time for a change?
No, I think people need to get this into perspective. When people talk about 13 years of Tories, you know, in government, it wasn't. There was a coalition, then there was a supply and demand with, you know, the DUP. So there was a couple of years with Conservatives. And then the country wanted more of us. Hence, you got an 80-seat majority. I'll tell you what has set us all backwards, without a shadow of a doubt, and that was lockdown and COVID and what's unfolded from that, the £400 billion cost, the cost of living crisis, the mental health, the health issues.
And you spoke out against the lockdowns.
I always did, and Labour would have locked down longer and harder. So what's actually shook the country up and what's got everybody unhappy is not those 13 years. It has been the last couple and the devastating consequences from them. And that's what I think has been the issue.
It's a bit more than that. And I don't think in my lifetime I've ever wanted to have a Labour government, and I don't want to have a Labour government now. But I do want a Conservative government and a Conservative Party to do better. They have failed on many important areas of policy, and public expenditure is one of them. 2.57 trillion is the national debt. It's costing $8 billion a day.
And Derek, you're quite right, because I don't believe we were Conservatives as we went into that never-ending lockdown. That, to me, was socialism. The dial shifted away from personal responsibility into socialism.
You hit upon a very important point, because I think the Conservative Party have, by stealth, actually created a socialist society.
And it was interesting when you had...
Where we don't question...
Well, if the Tories have messed up so much, it's time for a change.
No, it's time to find your inner Tory, which I believe Rishi Sunak has now done.
But Derek, do the Tories need 5 years in opposition to find their inner Tory?
No, because I think that we have in Rishi Sunak somebody who is clever, somebody who I think has the right instincts, somebody who's going to be clearly very competent, and somebody that we should give a chance.
OK, what do you think about this, Rebecca?
I don't think they need 5 years in opposition to think about it. I think they need 10 years in opposition to think about it. I think they
Says the socialist in the room, of course you do.
Yes, that's literally why I'm here.
Don't you think 10 years is a bit presumptuous for Keir Starmer to be announcing that he's got 10 years?
I think it's ambitious, and I don't know whether it would still be Keir Starmer. I think there should be 10 years of Labour. I think he should probably do the 5 and see how it gets on.
Who's next?
Who's next? Angela Rayner?
I would love it to be Angela Rayner.
Why would you love Angela Rayner?
She's my fringe twin.
I see. But are there other non-aesthetic reasons why you like her in charge?
I think she seems like a good crack. She definitely wouldn't ban vaping or smoking, which I think it would be very nice. She's less nanny-statey on all sorts of social policies. But I think my frustration here is I'm hearing a lot of people talking about, well, Labour would have done this, Labour would have done that. It's completely hypothetical revisionist
It's not. We saw Wales.
We don't know what actually would have happened.
Keir Starmer called Freedom Day in July 2021 reckless.
But we don't know what he would actually have done. He was in opposition.
Well, he would have sent us back into lockdown. We would have had a Christmas lockdown in the end of 2021.
His job was to be in opposition, therefore he was in opposition, therefore he opposed everything they did.
Let Rebecca, I'll come back to you in a moment, Derek. Continue your point, Rebecca.
My point is that they are tired. They are doing a rubbish job. You can talk about the little bits of, like, there was a coalition for a bit and some people stopped them and there was a lockdown, but they oversaw everything that happened in the last 13 years. They are tired. We are tired. Even if I were a Tory, I would say they need a break, they need a rest.
What's interesting
is
Keir hasn't even been in yet, but he's tired because he couldn't come up with a policy. And when I look at the policy he is going to do, he's going to cost us more. Like I said, the ULEZ, the reverse the net zero reverse.
What are those policies? I mean, it's a race to net zero, which is going to cost my viewers and listeners money.
Having places that you can study to do things
more
rather
houses.
than go to
What's
university.
the timeline for those houses? 1.5 million.
In the next 5 years, he said.
No, he didn't. There was no timeline.
He said he literally just said
I looked at
in the next 5 years.
The more houses. When you've got open borders, you're right. You will need more houses. He never talked about immigration. He's looking at new borders.
He's
also bringing in a race equalities
act. Did the open borders problem start under?
Esther, one at a time. First, Esther.
He's bringing in a race equalities act that nobody knows what that is. We've got an equalities act. Your mate Angela wants to bring in a misogyny bill. Well, what actually is a misogyny?
I would love a misogyny
Could you
bill.
explain
That sounds
to me
like a
what
bloody
it is?
brilliant
Well,
idea. Presumably, before they do it, they'll do some research into it and they'll work it out.
But does it mean
misogyny
you'll
should
get...
be a hate crime. Misogyny is not currently a hate crime.
Misogyny is a terrible thing.
So if you deliberately attack somebody because they're a woman, that is not classed as a hate crime. That is unbearable.
Rebecca, I agree with you about that, but it could be the thin end of the wedge. Who decides what...
It could be. This is the load. We're sitting here talking about the hypothetical again and again and
Rebecca,
again.
the grey area of the law means that it's someone's judgment what misogyny is, and they could argue...
It clarifies what misogyny
but
is.
it's
That's the point of an act.
interpretation. Let me just make this point.
That's the point of an act.
Let me make the point, which is up to interpretation. A mother-in-law joke could be a hate crime.
The point of
and that's the danger.
And what we know he wants to do is reverse...
Do you really think any sensible adult's going to do that?
That's the risk.
And reverse Brexit is what he wants to do.
They're not going to win or lose the next election on what their views are on misogyny. I think there are some very big issues that faces modern Britain. And in Keir Starmer's speech, I don't think he did the detail of some of these big vision issues justice, and he got some of the details fundamentally wrong. So, for example, I mean, he was very critical of Rishi Sunak's notion that too many people are going to university. Well, actually, I think most universities think that. I chair a Cambridge University Foundation Board, and I know that it actually created pressures in the system. And much more than that, 35% of graduates are in low-skilled jobs. So they're not even getting the jobs once they've been to university.
Derek, he also changed his ideas. First of all, he's going to get rid of student fees, and now he isn't. Like I said, he's Mr. Chop and Change.
But changing...
One of
the big problems with the Tories, like earlier, Lee Anderson was like, they've just nicked a thing that Michael Gove said. Yeah, because they're not so consumed by infighting, they can say, that was a good idea,
Rebecca,
we'll have it.
Campaigning
they
for Jeremy Corbyn,
sensible.
campaigning for the Hamas-loving Jeremy Corbyn to become Prime Minister and then expelling him from the party, that's a bit of a U-turn, isn't it?
Yeah, he fixed it. He got rid of the crippling anti-Semite at the head of it.
He went out campaigning to have him as your Prime Minister.
And then got rid of him. How else could he have got rid of him? How else could he have got rid of him?
No, he keeps changing.
How else could he have got rid of him?
Well, look, I tell you what, the show is all about opinions. What's yours? Mark at gbnews.com. My panel will be back shortly. We'll be discussing the shock resignation of Holly Willoughby. Put your teeth back in. Holly Willoughby has left this morning, so we'll reflect on that very shortly. But a mum of four has become the latest citizen to fight back against lawless Britain, as Tammy Dacre took the law and a spade into her own hands to thwart a vicious gang of bike thieves targeting a cyclist outside her Worcestershire home. Take a bow, Miss Dacre. Those toe rags didn't hang around, did they? On your bike, lads. Coming up with proposals to label processed food as addictive, hot on the heels of Rishi Sunak's plans to phase out smoking. Are we, the great British public, now being treated like children? My panel thrashed that one out in the media buzz. We'll also discuss, as I said, Holly Willoughby's bombshell decision to quit this morning. Can the show survive, and what will she do next? Coming up, as Sir Keir Starmer ignores the nation's frustration at the worsening war on motorists, promising to speed up the march to net zero, does this policy show that Labour is out of touch with ordinary voters? I'll get stuck into that with author and top academic Matt Goodwin. Let me tell you, he's a fascinating guy, and he's next.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Now, after Rishi Sunak used his speech at the Tory party conference last week to declare that he would take a pragmatic approach to net zero, Sir Keir Starmer has today pledged to do exactly the opposite. Take a listen.
When Rishi Sunak says, row back on our climate mission, I say, speed ahead. Speed ahead with investment. Speed ahead with 500,000 jobs. Speed ahead with great British energy. A new energy company that will harness clean British power for good British jobs.
But with a recent poll revealing that nearly half of Brits oppose climate policies that take money out of their pockets, the Labour leader risks alienating voters with his full-speed charge towards net zero. Well, the academic and best-selling author Matt Goodwin joins me now. So, Matt, does Starmer's promise to speed up net zero show that Labour is out of touch with ordinary voters?
Well, Mark, as you mentioned, our recent polling certainly showed that a large number of voters, especially in the red wall, feel very concerned about the growing costs of net zero. They're not comfortable with things like scrapping the ban on the sale of petrol and diesel cars. They're not comfortable with things like ULEZ. They're not comfortable with some of the changes that are being proposed to people's houses in the years ahead. And of course, it's working class voters, Mark, who are especially likely to be hit by many of these measures, the very voters that, of course, Keir Starmer is hoping to win back. So as I've said, I think this is going to become a really big dividing line in British politics.
Yes, I mean, he spoke, didn't he, Matthew, several times, multiple times, about working people. But did he connect with them today? Did he address their concerns? I mean, for example, he didn't mention illegal immigration or stopping the boats.
Well, that was one of the big surprises for me as well. I think if you look at where voters are in the country, and this is something obviously I look at a lot as a pollster, immigration is the third top issue for all voters. It's the most important issue, Mark, for 2019, Conservatives, by the way, and it's a really big issue for working class voters up and down the country. And I was surprised to see, firstly, Labour's plan on illegal migration about 2 weeks ago. It was very thin on the detail. Keir Starmer talked about smashing gangs, but he didn't talk about having a deterrent. He didn't talk about dealing with the longer term push factors. And then today in the speech, he barely mentioned it at all. And to me, that's a kind of sign that firstly, Labour are still not comfortable talking about migration. They know it's going to divide their base. They know it's going to divide their activists. But secondly, I think to be honest, Mark, they just haven't got the policies on it yet. They haven't got the detail. And I suspect that's why immigration is going to become a massive issue at this general election around the corner.
Well, indeed, I mean, I was astonished when at the weekend he told Victoria Derbyshire on the BBC that he would axe the Rwanda plan, even if it's working. What is the strategy?
Yeah, I mean, that's very curious. Firstly, the National Crime Agency has already said that they think the only thing that would essentially work in stopping the small boats is having a deterrent policy. If you meet anybody in Australia, for example, who successfully turn back the boats, they'll tell you you need an active deterrent. I suspect the European Union will even get there in the years ahead, given the problems in the Mediterranean. So for Labour to say it would remove that deterrent, it would focus instead on smashing the gangs, which every security analyst that I've spoken to, and I've spoken to a lot over the last year, say that, it's a bit like whack-a-mole, Mark. You get rid of one smuggling gang and another pops up in its place. You're just dealing with the end of the problem. You're not dealing with the root cause. And the root cause is we have to persuade and show people who are thinking of making the journey why it's not worth their time making the journey. And that's why a deterrent ultimately is what we need. So I was surprised by Keir Starmer's stance. The other thing briefly, Mark, to mention, they didn't really say all that much about legal migration. And we know for voters, legal migration at 600,000 plus is now becoming an enormous issue. Just the pace of change, the pace of churn in the country is something that is really alarming voters.
Well, most definitely. I mean, he made a welcome announcement today of 1.5 million houses, but that won't touch the sides if you've got annual legal migration of 600,000, will it? I agree with you about the importance of the issue of stop the boats, legal and illegal migration into the country. The other topic will be the cost of living. You've said that in your brilliant Substack articles. It is about inflation. It's about how hard it is. People are struggling at the moment. Was there much on offer today for struggling Brits in terms of the economy from Keir Starmer?
I mean, Labour are talking about trying to revive growth. They're talking about trying to incentivise business, trying to have a new relationship with business. But look, on both the left and the right, something I talk about on Twitter quite a bit, Mark, as you know, there's not really a serious strategy for reviving growth and productivity over the longer term. So that's why Keir Starmer's gone hard on housing. And just while we're here, Mark, one thing to bear in mind, Labour are saying they're going to build a 1.5 million new homes. Here's something to keep in mind. The Centre for Policy Studies has estimated we're going to need to build 650,000 homes every year just to keep up with the demand from migration. So even if Labour pulls off this pledge, you're looking at basically covering 2 years of housing for migration. So, the longer term problems facing this country is, as I know you know, and we talked about it before, are not being addressed by either the left or the right. And that is leaving many voters out there. I think voters aren't stupid. I think they're looking at this and they can sense nobody really has the answers to long-term problems.
Indeed. Notwithstanding your criticisms of what was missing from Starmer's speech today, does it matter? Is this academic? Have they won the election anyway? Are they home and hosed?
Well, if you look at the polls in the recent by-elections, especially the recent one in Scotland, Labour are outperforming their position in the national polls. They're doing better than the polls suggest, and the polls already suggest we're heading to a Labour majority government. So, look, if I was a betting man, and I am when it comes to elections, I would be betting on Labour winning the next general election. I give Rishi Sunak a 5% chance of turning it around. We know that incumbent governments across the world, Mark, have been smashed by inflation. That is really the story of the next election, by the way. It's the politics of inflation. It's the fact voters are going into the supermarket, looking at the receipt and saying, how much? They are really, really struggling. And ultimately, it's incumbent governments that get smashed in that context. And you know, Mark, the more that you and I talk, the more I think actually maybe that's what the Conservative Party needs. Maybe the Conservative Party needs a long period in opposition to figure out what it is, what it believes, who it wants to win over, and where it wants to take Britain.
Last but not least, what about the dreaded W word, Matthew, wokeism? Could that give the Conservatives an opportunity? No definition from Sir Keir Starmer today of what a biological woman is. Last week at conference, Rishi Sunak said, a man is a man, a woman is a woman. That's just common sense. That sort of sentiment has cut through with many voters, doesn't it?
I think it does, and I think Rishi Sunak did well to kind of park his tanks on the lawn of some of those issues. What was missing for me, and I was in Manchester, Mark, was the detail. So it's fine to say a woman is a woman, a man is a man, but unless you're removing radical gender ideology from schools and universities, it's meaningless. It's fine to say Britain is not a racist country and multiculturalism is a success story, but if you're not removing a divisive critical race theory from schools and universities, it's meaningless. Like if you're not clamping down on people who are celebrating in London a terrorist organization like Hamas that's been prescribed by the government. So I think lots of people are looking Sunak and say, yes, this all sounds very nice, right? It sounds like you're kind of on the side of common sense, but where's the detail? How are you actually going to push back against this? And if you look at what Labour's proposing last week, the racial equality charter, some of the changes that they've got around schooling and around identity politics, this issue is only going to become more pressing for voters. It's going to become more salient. And I suspect then the Conservatives really need to decide, are they up for this fight or are they going to duck it? And if they duck it, then who's going to replace them and actually take this on?
Do check out Matt Goodwin's excellent Substack articles, matthewjgoodwin.org or GoodwinMJ on Twitter. And his book is Values, Voice and Virtue, The New British Politics. Thanks, Matt. We'll catch up again soon. Coming up in Uncancelled, what impact would a Labour government have on our rights to free speech? Will it be 5 years of woke hell? Founder of the Free Speech Union, maverick journalist Toby Young will join me live to look at the future of our freedoms in Britain. But next in the Media Buzz, can This Morning survive without Holly Willoughby following the star's sensational exit from the show? See you in 2.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
And Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, tomorrow's news tonight in our media buzz, and more front pages have arrived, courtesy of Bobby, and let's see what we've got. OK, The Guardian, Israeli troops mass on Gaza border as Hamas attack, death toll hits 1,000. And we will heal wounded Britain, Starmer promises, and he tells despairing voters that he's got their back. The Daily Mail next. And the real reasons that Holly's dramatically quit this morning, by the writer who knows her best. And this was a Holocaust, pure and simple. Babies beheaded, 40 children shot dead in a single settlement, families burned alive. Sam Greenhill, writer at the Mail, meets survivors of the Hamas death squads and hears their stories of unimaginable horror. Telegraph next. Hamas massacres babies and children, families found murdered in their homes as Israeli death toll reaches 1,000. Starmer's time to shine. Photograph there of the leader of the opposition, would-be Prime Minister Keir Starmer, being showered in glitter by a, ironically, democracy protester. He wants proportional representation. Unusual that he didn't take a democratic way of expressing his view. Gas prices surge as Russia suspected of sabotaging pipeline is the other story in the Telegraph. Well, let's get reaction now from my top pundits. We have former Cabinet Minister and GB News star Esther McVey, banker and visiting Professor Derek Lord, and author and journalist Rebecca Reid. Now, the dust hasn't even settled on Rishi Sunak's announcement of a smoking ban policy last week, and already calls are growing for processed foods like ready meals and fizzy drinks to be labelled addictive. It comes after research has found that 14% of adults and 12% of kids are hooked on ultra-processed foods. So what do we think about this? With yet more nanny state overreach, are the public being treated like children? What do you think?
Well, I'm more concerned about a happiness index rather than a sourness index. I'm all in favour of people peddling death in whatever way they like, whether it's through smoking or whether it's through eating jam donuts. I have to admit, occasionally I do both. So I think I'm probably in
your body's a temple.
I'm probably in good company, but I also exercise, you know, and I think that that's what we should actually try and make people understand. Exercise is a fantastic thing for the mind and for the body. And I'm not in favour of governments interfering any more than they have to. But finally, I should say, there is, and rightly so, concern about the £6.5 billion that it's costing the NHS through associated obesity disease.
Indeed, type 2 diabetes, blood pressure, heart disease, all the rest of it. By the way, depression and dementia potentially as well.
Indeed.
Rebecca, the public aren't stupid. They don't need a label on a packet of Pringles that says these are rather addictive.
No, I agree. And I think anyone who's eaten a Pringle would know that. But I think, and I'm very, very pro...
Once you pop, you can't stop.
It's true. I mean, to be fair, Pringles tell you that. Like, the label does say that. But no, I'm very much in favour of people being able to smoke as much as they want, drink as much as they want, eat whatever bad things they want, or not bad, because we shouldn't moralise about food, but highly processed foods. My only issue is I'm not sure people understand about the carcinogenic side of processed food. And I think if you know...
Don't eat Chinese.
Well, it depends. If you're eating like a sort of lovely homemade Chinese, absolutely. If you're eating something that's been through 9 different machines to get to you, then no. And I like people to have informed consent. And therefore, if you're eating something carcinogenic because it's highly processed sausages, and you think that actually if you have sausages with a bit of vegetables, you're doing a good job, that's not... The government aren't quite doing their job there. It's about education.
Yes, I mean, Esther, you're a dyed-in-the-wool libertarian, aren't you? You can't be pleased with all of these sin taxes and labelling food addictive and all the rest of it.
Well, I think, you know, if I want an ice cream
and I do have a sweet tooth and I do like my chocolate and ice cream, then I will have it. But it's everything in moderation. That's what it's about. It's not about the product. It's probably the quantity in which you eat that product. That is a bit about self-responsibility, knowing what you can have, and also education on what you should eat.
Well,
But
is a
all of this
label
banning-
education? Is a label a form of education? So when you buy that packet of crisps and it says this is an ultra-processed food and it's addictive, is that helpful?
Well, that's already on there. But actually, I mean, when you go to school, when you're growing up, my parents would say to me, yes, if you have a bar of chocolate, don't forget to have an apple, all of these things. But you can, you know, it is about the greediness and eating too much rather than that. I mean, what we're going to have, if I'm going to have a 99 and instead of the flake, it's going to be a health warning, think twice before you have a lick of the ice cream.
You're going to get a 98 or a 97.
And anyway, where are the parents in all this?
I think, but the thing is, you can only take...
Let them decide.
I agree, but you can only teach your children what you already know. And if you... And I think the bigger question is, people used to have one packet of crisps and then stop, and now people eat 4, and that's about being unhappy, and that's about wanting to fill up a void. And
I'm
why
not for banning, and I'm not for taxing. That's all about a money grab, and banning's telling people what to do. And you go to prohibition then, and I'll be making chocolate in my basement for my neighbours.
Derek raises a great point, which is it seems these days it's the government that's raising our kids and the government that's telling us how to live, and I suspect it's a hangover from the pandemic. Well, look, let's move on, because big showbiz news. Holly Willoughby has sensationally quit her This Morning presenting role after 14 years. She said in an Instagram post, "I've let ITV know today that after 14 years, I will not be returning to This Morning. To everyone who's ever worked on the show over the years, thank you so, so much." She goes on to say it's been an honour just to be part of this story. And I know this story has many chapters left to go. Sadly, however, I now feel I have to make this decision for me and my family. I will miss you all so much. Esther, you had a very successful career in television before you went into politics. Channel 5 and elsewhere. Brilliant broadcaster, Fives Company, lots of other things as well that you did. I think this is a big moment, actually, for the country. This is one of the best-known presenters in Britain, and she's quit one of the biggest shows.
Oh? Well, I'm glad it's so affecting you. It isn't actually affecting me whatsoever. Also, I will say, I mean, there was a bit of mourning when Richard and Judy left. I mean, they were there. Yeah. The show survived. It will survive once Holly's gone. And I bet you Holly will be back with some big nighttime show. I'm betting you she's going to do just fine.
Listen, but you know showbiz inside out, and that American adage, don't quit the hits.
Oh?
What if she struggles to find a format that suits her? Could she come to regret this? Because This Morning is an established brand and it's got millions of viewers. I think she's taking risks.
This is going to shock you. This is going to shock you. I think she's already got her nighttime show. I think she will sail seamlessly between This Morning and nighttime show. Yes, of course they will. Look, you know, I think she's lovely. I think, as you say, she's a great presenter. I think she knew the time was up. Right. The show was over. She's moved on, and I'm quite sure with her brands and everything else that she does, and she'll get another TV show. Lots of people like her.
Do you think she'll try to come to GB News?
I bet you she's been knocking on that door.
I love that. That would be great. I hear there might be some vacancies knocking about.
I've got no doubt she's been WhatsApping Angelo. Listen, let me tell you, can I just say that the schedule is full? There's no space here. We've got a lineup of stars. And now, look, we've got Derek Lord. What another superstar signing you are.
I was just going to tell you a news flash. I'm going to self-identify as white.
I'm blonde.
I'm blonde.
And I am her replacement.
Do it. Listen.
I would actually watch that. I'd love that.
You don't have to change a thing about yourself.
Oh, no, I think a blonde wig. Nothing else, just a blonde
Would you
wig.
be good about talking about pasta recipes and swimsuits and things like that?
Yes.
Why ever not?
Can you pretend to be hungover after the National Television Awards? Because they do that every year.
Have you got opinions about the menopause and such?
No.
All right, listen, what I'll do is I'll bring you up to speed.
You're just way too into this, if you don't mind me saying.
Are you a Hollywood super fan?
Look, I think it is an iconic show This Morning, started by Richard and Judy. Can it survive in her absence,
yes,
Rebecca?
Honestly, daytime TV, particularly shows like This Morning, are a form of social care. And I remember when I had when I had a very small baby and I was very lonely and couldn't leave the sofa, they became like my pseudo family. And they're important for honestly, if you are stuck at home all day, you need them.
So you don't think without Holly that this morning could come to an end?
No,
I think the biggest...
The show must go on.
The biggest thing was moving from the Albert Dock to London.
Yeah.
I was surprised the show survived that, really.
Yeah. But they have a fake background. It's got the pretend river behind it.
And that was the golden era for Richard and Judy, wasn't it?
With that, United Kingdom in the water doing the weather.
With the old, the cheeky weatherman?
Yes.
More cheeky than we realised, but there you go. That's another story.
Aren't they always?
Listen, there you go. What do you think? Do you care? Holly Willoughby has quit this morning. Let me say one thing, though, on the record. She's been through an awful lot and a very, very traumatic few weeks. So we definitely wish her and the family well, and I hope she has every success in the future. Folks, lots more to come, but let me tell you what it's going to be. Daniel Radcliffe and Victoria Beckham are nominated as the Greatest Britain Union jackass. Find out why. But next in Uncancelled, what impact would a Labour government have on our right to free speech? Founder of the Free Speech Union, maverick journalist Toby Young, will join me live to look at the future of our freedoms in this country. Could 5 years of Labour be 5 years of woke hell? Find out after this.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Look, a few of you very concerned about this attack on Keir Starmer, and you're absolutely right, by the way, because he's the leader of the opposition. These are politicians. They ought to be safe. This from Pip, who says, "Hi, Mark. Much as I can't stomach the man, I'd hate to see a repeat of what happened to David Amess in regards to Keir Starmer. The nutter with the glitter might just as easily have held a weapon, and it shows that security teams surrounding MPs need to get their act together." Pip, I couldn't agree with you more. Let me see if I got something. I've got something on Holly Willoughby, which is that it's from Eileen. "Hi, Mark. I don't think Holly will be missed at all. I haven't watched the programme since Phil left because I was disgusted with what she said about him. How dare she be holier than thou? He did nothing wrong and it was all his own business. I'd love it if he came back," says Elaine. There you go. Well, it's all about opinions. Let me have yours, Mark, at gbnews.com. It's time now for Uncancelled. And as we heard earlier tonight, Keir Starmer vowed to deliver a Britain built to last during his speech at the Labour Party conference. But does that include the right to free speech? Starmer said in October 2022 it's time for tougher hate crime laws, so every LGBT plus crime is treated as an aggravated offence. Labour has previously pledged to impose harsher sentences on those who commit hate crimes targeted at someone's sexual identity, transgender identity or disability, as well as misogyny. But a report by the Institute of Economic Affairs think tank claims legislation would pose serious implications for freedom of speech in the UK. Well, who better to ask than the founder of the Free Speech Union and the editor and founder of the Daily Sceptic online newspaper, journalist and broadcaster Toby Young. Hi, Toby. Now, the Tories have presided over a rise in cancel culture, curbs on free speech, and, of course, the debanking scandal. Will it get worse under Labour?
Regrettably, Mark, I think it probably will get worse under Labour. Keir Starmer has already said, as you quoted earlier, that he wants to make every crime against LGBTQ plus people an aggravated offence, i.e. a hate crime, and that may include hate speech. I think in all likelihood, one of the first pieces of legislation a new Labour government will pass will be a Hate Crime and Public Order England and Wales Act, which will mirror the Hate Crime and Public Order Scotland Act, which received royal assent in Scotland in 2021, but which imposes probably the most draconian speech restrictions in Europe in Scotland. That'll be activated next year, and the Law Commission of England and Wales have already recommended that a similar bill, an almost identical bill to the bill that passed in Scotland, is introduced in England and Wales. I'm sure the next Labour government will do that. Another concern is that they'll follow through on the recommendations of the Leveson inquiry. As you'll recall, one of the recommendations is that state licensing of the press, whereby unless you are regulated by an official state regulator, impress, then you'll suffer all sorts of penalties, thereby forcing all newspapers and magazine publishers to register with a state regulator. That hasn't happened in this country for over 200 years. That'll be a major blow to press freedom. I think Labour's Race Equality Act looks pretty bad. It may well try and turn any denial of critical race theory into hate speech and prosecute people accordingly. There are various clauses of the Equality Act which haven't been activated. They're lying dormant on the statute books. One of them was described by Polly Toynbee with salivating mouth as socialism in one clause, which would impose a public duty on local authorities to ensure not just that people aren't discriminated against for reasons of race, sexual orientation, religion, but to do everything in their power to try and reduce socio-economic equality gaps, equality of outcome. And no doubt that will have implications for what people are free to say as well. And finally, Mark, I think a big concern is that given that Ofcom has been granted all these new powers over social media, it's effectively become the British social media regulator, and the head of Ofcom is appointed by the Secretary of State, the culture, the DCMS. In all likelihood, Labour will take advantage of Ofcom's new powers to try and silence dissenting speech on platforms like Twitter, Facebook, etc.
Well, indeed, in countries like Canada now, you've got the government more or less policing the internet with perfectly mainstream videos and podcasts not available in that country. You're right to mention critical race theory. The reason why it's so contentious is it goes against Martin Luther King's idea of a colourblind society. And, of course, then you've got the issue of could it be a hate crime to misgender someone, except that if you misgender someone, you are stating biological fact, which I would suggest is problematic. Briefly, before you go, Toby, normally and historically, censorship has been the domain of the right, hasn't it? Christian conservatives, Mary Whitehouse, films and songs being banned for being too raunchy or blasphemous. But of late, it seems that it's the left who are pushing for it.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I think the conventional wisdom on the left, not just here, but in America, across the Western world, was that the best remedy for bad speech, for false speech, was not to silence it, but more and better speech. That was known as the counter-speech doctrine and was set out in a famous Supreme Court case in the 1920s. And that held sway until about 2016. And there's been a real retreat from the counter-speech doctrine since then. And now the prevailing consensus amongst the left, have I just got cut off?
We just lost you. We lost you. Just finish your point if you can, Toby, because the clock's against us. We've lost Toby, but not a victim of a crackdown on free speech, let me tell you. Do check out Toby's excellent website, thedailyskeptic.co.uk. OK, let's have Esther's fantastic Union Jackass and Greatest Britain. Let's start with your Greatest Britain, Esther.
It is Noah Beer, and she is a British hero who managed to escape that festival massacre in Israel and saved the lives of 4 fellow revellers. She rammed her car through the Hamas roadblock, dodging a shower of bullets, driving straight to hospital to help 2 of the wounded passengers in her car.
There you go. OK, a nomination and a sentence from you, please. Derek, for your Greatest Britain.
Victoria Beckham, who needs no introduction, married to David, and she starred superbly on a documentary on the Beckhams recently on television, and they're near neighbours of mine in the country.
Oh, glad to hear your friends. How about you, Rebecca, your Greatest Britain?
Mine is Daniel Radcliffe, who this week gave a very moving interview about becoming a new father and sort of admitting that it was terrifying, but giving a real sense of hope about modern fatherhood.
He's a nice guy. I once sat on his packet of cigarettes. He didn't complain. I'm going to give it to Esther. A brilliant, brilliant nomination for that young woman, Noah Beer, who escaped Hamas terrorism. OK, briefly, if you can, Esther, your Union Jackass.
It has to be the security team at the Labour Party conference. How on earth did they let a protester get that close to Keir
Absolutely.
Starmer?
Derek?
It has to be Angela Rayner. We are in danger of making her Britain's next Deputy Prime Minister if people are stupid enough to vote Labour at the next election, and I don't want to see that happen.
I will say, I think she probably had a better chance of winning the election than Starmer, but I take your point. Rebecca, briefly, your Union Jackass.
Mine is the soap shop Lush for posting this sign, which is an incredibly insensitive... it's just not the moment to be trying to stir up hatred even further than it already exists.
Too right. Well, I'm going to give it to Lush for that ridiculous sign. I'm sure the company have disowned that message from a store manager or employee, but brilliant stuff. Well done to my wonderful pundits tonight. I am back at... Oh, by the way, let me tell you that we have heard... OK, I have a response from Lush. We are a diverse company with staff of all nationalities and religions whose personal views and opinions may vary. However, the following is our company position. Lush's stance is always that we deplore all violence and all injustice. Our wish is for peace and safety for all Israeli and Palestinian people. We support the upholding of international law and the human rights of all peoples. That is their response. Brilliant stuff. Thanks for my panel. I'm back on Friday at 9. Patrick's here tomorrow. Headliners is next. Thanks for your company.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Rain moving south into northern England, Northern Ireland and Wales overnight. Clearer but staying blustery for Scotland whilst it remains warm in the far south. There's a significant temperature contrast across the UK at the moment. Warmth in the southeast, chilly in the north and northwest, and in between a band of rain finally easing across central and western Scotland, pushing into southern Scotland during the evening, Northern Ireland, and then later on across parts of northern England and Wales. The rain pepping up by the end of the night in these areas as well. Now, it stays dry further south, but there'll be a lot of low cloud and mist to begin things on Wednesday. A mild start here, but a chilly start for Scotland, especially central belt northwards, mid-single figures, and a strong wind, in fact, gales blowing through exposed northern and northwestern coasts with frequent showers here. So a fairly unpleasant day to come here, even if it has stopped raining. Further south, we've got spells of rain through Wales, the Midlands and East Anglia continuing through the day, staying largely dry after the early mist clears in the far south and southeast. Still warm, but not as warm as it has been. And then it's in the south where the rain comes to a stop on Thursday. The rain does ease, but it stays fairly drizzly along some of these southern counties of England. Brighter skies further north. In fact, a nice sunny day for North Wales, Northern England, much of Scotland and Northern Ireland. And then on Friday, further wet weather in the south before that clears to colder weather at the weekend.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m. Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
You're with GB News and our top story tonight. The US president has condemned attacks by Hamas on Israel, vowing to have Israel's back. Joe Biden was speaking about 2 hours ago in the White House. Well, the Hamas terrorist group has been firing missiles throughout the day, earlier warning residents in the southern Israeli city of Ashkelon to leave their homes. Israel's anti-missile system was used to intercept much of the incoming rocket fire. Joe Biden saying Hamas's attack is an act of sheer evil.
This attack has brought to the surface painful memories and the scars left by a millennia of anti-Semitism and genocide of the Jewish people. So in this moment, we must be crystal clear. We stand with Israel. We stand with Israel. And we will make sure Israel has what it needs to take care of its citizens, defend itself, and respond to this attack.
Well, the rocket attacks have been continuing all